So what I would tell the procurement leader is, let's not forget the human in the loop, right? I know it's a cliched phrase, right? We hear it all over the place, but it's so relevant, right? Let's not forget human in the loop, or this idea of judgment in the loop, that the tech matters. We need the technology. We cannot run away from the technology. It has to be integrated in. Let's think about, when we think about the deployment of these tools and the technologies, let's think of it in a strategic fashion. Let's build roadmaps. Let's think of a vision of what we want this to be. But that vision must always have the human at the center, because when the system or the process breaks down, and it will, it always does, no one's going to say, why did the algorithm do this? It was, why did you let this happen? Right? The human ends up as the point of accountability.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by Omer Abdullah. Now, Omer was a management consultant, and then he built SmartCube, exited that, and so is a procurement entrepreneur helping those in procurement supply chain on their own never-ending climb. Omer, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, John. It's fantastic to be here.
So you're doing something really, really cool. Can you tell us about Procuria and why you're doing this? What is it on your heart that just motivated you to go make this happen?
Sure. So, as you said, I'm one of the founders of the SmartCube. We built the company over 20 years, really focused around helping procurement organizations around the world get better intelligence and analytics and be able to make better decisions in what they do. And one of the things that I noticed over those 2 decades was, of course, the rise of ProcureTech and just the really fantastic things that ProcureTech providers like yourself were doing for the community and for procurement practitioners around the world. And with the advent of AI, now I know AI has been around for a long time, but in our sort of modern thinking of what AI is, it's really only been around for the last 2 to 3 to 4 years, right? It's been around longer than that, but really in earnest, in the sort of public consciousness, it's been around the last several years. But what it's done is it's accelerated the way we think about how work can be done and how work actually is being done. And that's a pretty significant shift. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I started thinking about, well, what does this mean, right? So with the advent of ProcureTech and then with the development of AI, incorporation of AI into the technology, I'm not going to get into conversations about AI native or AI first, or let's not go there.
Or even what all those things even mean, right?
Yeah. Right. But let's just say with the integration of AI into technology and the way we sort of think about it, it's accelerating the pace of change for the procurement function. And to me, the real interesting thing was less about the technology, because the technology will get there, depending on whatever your specific objective is. It will get there at some point, right? Some will say for certain instances it's already there. Others, we have a little bit of work to do, but that's fine.
Yep.
But what does it mean for the people? And how's that going to change the way the practitioner, what do they do? How do they do it? Are they ready to do it? And that became a real sort of interest area for me, just on a personal level, is the procurement practitioner of today ready for the procurement future of tomorrow?
And generally the answer is hard no.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. And in my conversations with CPOs and with founders like yourself and with practitioners that are out there, I typically ask a question. So what percentage of practitioners do you think are ready for this post-AI world, right? Whatever that is. And you know what the lowest percentage is? It's the lowest percentage I've gotten from anybody is probably like 60%. And on average, it's probably like 80%, right? So what does that mean? That means the large majority of practitioners today aren't ready for what this future looks like, right? So I've been thinking a lot about, well, what does that mean? How do we get them ready? How do we sort of move the needle so that they are ready for this future, this sort of post-AI procurement future? And so to me, that's what I'm starting Procuria to really focus around. So Procuria is my sort of attempt to come at a solution to this particular problem, and really about trying to answer the question of, what does a procurement practitioner of the future need to look like to really be successful? So, sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but that's really the genesis of the thinking, if you will, and what Procuria, my new venture, is really going to be focused around and focus on trying to solve.
I think there's something so beautiful about helping people on their journey. As you know, and others know, the never-ending climb is something I believe deeply in, and leaving the world better than we found it. And when there's a combination of change that's coming in as fast and as hard as AI is right now, I mean, I think about the software developer community. We think about ProcureTech and procurement. There's a lot of purchasing of software development, software that's been developed, et cetera. But developers are probably one of the early canary in the mine, if you will, of a community of people or a skill set that is ahead of some of the other disciplines. I'd love to dig into a little bit of what we can learn from the shifts that developers are going through, of going from, hey, here's a cool thing that I can call that I could chat with, to, oh, wow, it can write a little bit of code, to, oh, it could write more than a little bit of code, to,
Right.
Is my job at risk? To, hey, if I'm doing my job well, I can use this to be X% or X times more efficient than I was before.
Yeah.
And all of the ways to go do that. And so there's a maturity continuum for using this technology that software developers have, a year or two on relative to procurement. And I feel like without going all the way into psychology, there's a whole host of things that we can look at for what we can learn from software developers that we can help bring to procurement and other professions to go help them with that same kind of a shift.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great example, because who would have thought that the advent of this technology would take work away from the very people who created this technology, right?
Yeah.
It's really unbelievable in some ways. And I think that shift that you talked about, right? To, what is this thing? To, maybe you can do a little bit, to all the way to, holy crap, what does this mean for me?
Yeah.
Right? Is I think very analogous to what I think we're seeing in the procurement space. It's an existential question. I don't want to overstate this, but I do think there's a large element of it being existential. And we're sort of seeing people. So let me kind of talk about that in a couple of different ways. Let me talk about it, one, from a structure of work perspective and how people are reacting to it, right? So from a structure of work perspective, if you look at what procurement does, right? I'm going to oversimplify. But if you look at the classic pyramid of work, right? There's all this transactional stuff at the bottom. There's this work that in the middle that I call kind of cognitive decision support type of work, right? It has a little bit of thinking, a little bit of sort of analysis and in collation, and more than collation, but synthesis, if you will. And then there's the stuff right at the top, which is strategic work, right? And we've always known that ProcureTech was going to take out the transactional layer. We've always known that, right? Put AI aside, it was already happening. It was only a matter of time before we would really take out all the transactional stuff. The interesting thing about generative AI and what we're seeing from an AI perspective is it's tapping into that middle layer as well, right? And the cognitive decision support kind of work, right? And if you look at that, things like running RFPs and implementing strategies and data synthesis and analysis, all of those sorts of things. There's a lot that you can do that you wouldn't have thought the technology could have done 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, right? And so we're seeing it, that pyramid is going to change, right? It's already changing in many ways. The progressive procurement practitioners are already thinking about that. But let's just fast forward 5-10 years. That pyramid is going to look rapidly different, right? If I were to go to an extreme, I would say that entire bottom layer, taken out. Right? The middle layer, probably a good chunk of that's going to go away as well. And maybe even some aspects of what's remaining, but a good chunk of the real thought work is going to have to remain, right? To create what's called the enabled practitioner, right? You talked about how coders are now thinking about, well, okay, if I've really come to terms with this, I'm going to think about how do I use this to really make me much more effective, much more efficient, and much more broadly enabled, right? Which is a good thing, right? In terms of where we have to go. Same thing in the procurement space. So that pyramid is going to truncate or change into something that is much different. We're going to I'm not the first person to say this, but we're probably past the point of peak employment in traditional procurement roles. In fact, we're probably going to see a decline of that. We're probably going to see an uptick in new types of roles. But again, we go back to the point that we started this conversation with, is a large chunk of practitioners are not ready for that change. They don't have those skills. So what do you do, right? What do you do? Well, you really have three choices. You can blank it out and just keep plugging away, doing what you got to do, and it'll all go away. Or
there's this kind of
right.
exactly right.
Exactly.
The three monkeys, right?
Yeah. Or you have what's also happening is people get worried and they have an existential crisis, right? Or you can do something about it, right? And what I'm coming at this from is what I want Procuria to be is to do something about it. Right now, I don't have the answers. I don't know what the answer is. Right, I've got a few ideas around what the answers are, but my goal is over the next year is to go on a journey along with folks like yourself, along with practitioners, along with CPOs, to really say, look, what does this future look like, right? And what do you, as the CPO and the practitioner that works with the CPO, need to look like? How should they think? How should they behave? What's the mindsets? What are the sort of various pillars of thinking that they have to have and practice they have to have in order to make that transition? Now, the other aspect, and you and I have talked about this before, is not everybody's going to make that change, right?
Yeah.
Some people don't want to. Some people won't be able to, right?
Yep.
And that's okay. That's fine, right? I mean, we all make our choices. But those who want to are going to have to do some work to make that transition and move. So that's kind of how I sort of see it. I think the coding analogy is perfect because it really, what's happened there, and again, of course, look, this raises a whole separate set of issues. Oh, what happens to our junior people? How do you train people up? And, all of these things come up, and they're valid questions. That's what we have to figure out and answer. We're going to have to do it.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind for me is that concept of the apprentice, right? So I know that there's a significant opportunity to bring the concept of an apprentice that is learning and building those skills.
Yeah.
And if I think about folks like Rise Now, they're passionate about going and creating those apprentice kind of model that can come in and build those next generation skills. And so I love what Matt and the team are working on doing there, because I feel like there's that similar shared kind of a goal to go and help people make this transition in a meaningful way. And what I love to see is the thought, the passion, and the energy directed towards helping people in this journey. And I think that is going to be one of the most important ingredients in the next few years. I know that there's the fear and risk aversion to change, the anxiety that goes with change, that, at least half the population ends up feeling, maybe a moderate degree or maybe a very high degree of anxiety. If you were a steam engine mechanic when diesel engines for railroads were really starting to take over, there was a disdain and a disbelief. And frankly, steam engines are a beautiful classical piece of engineering, but they do not keep pace with the power, the traction, etc., of the consistency of a diesel engine. And so we've got this same kind of a parallel happening today. And there will be the artisans that refuse. And that's a belief. There are those who make things on Etsy when you could buy it for a 5% of the cost off of Temu. But that's not the point, right? The point is not that there is no home for somebody to build something on Etsy. The point is that there is a massive shift, and probably a majority of things end up moving to the new model. What would you invite a procurement leader to really reflect on? What would you want them to remember 6 weeks from now after they've watched something as our conversation here?
Look, for a leader, okay, let's separate the leader from the practitioner. But for the leader thinking about this, here's kind of the thing that I think is so important. There are a ton of pressures right now. The C-suite is saying, hey, this AI thing, I need to see something. I need to see you do something with AI so that I can tell the street that we're making progress and getting real impact, right? Not just from a PR perspective, although there are plenty of people think about it from a PR perspective, but from a real tangible look, make use of this thing. Let's get impact. Let's get efficiency. Let's get effectiveness, and then I want to be able to tell folks, helps our share price, blah blah blah. At the same time, you've got the CFO looking at this saying, and CFOs are relevant in our procurement world, very relevant, because most CPOs report up to the CFO. CFOs are saying, hey, how do I do this to be able so that you can do more with less? In other words, efficiency. In other words, lesser headcount, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? How can I get my cost trending well downwards? And those are real pressures that leaders have. And at the same time, internal customers for procurement want better support, more embedded support. They want all of these different aspects. And so what I would tell the procurement leader is, let's not forget the human in the loop, right? I know it's a cliched phrase, right? We hear it all over the place, but it's so relevant, right? Let's not forget human in the loop, or this idea of judgment in the loop, that the tech matters. We need the technology. We cannot run away from the technology. It has to be integrated in. Let's think about, when we think about the deployment of these tools and the technologies, let's think of it in a strategic fashion. Let's build roadmaps. Let's think of a vision of what we want this to be. But that vision must always have the human at the center, because when the system or the process breaks down, and it always does, no one's going to say, oh, why did the algorithm do this? It was, why did you let this happen? Right? The human ends up as the point of accountability. So keep that human in the loop. And so I think to that point of, AI is going to take over a lot of the stuff that we do. Yes, you're right? A lot of these folks, like the artisans, are going to feel aggrieved by it, right? But it's a way, I think we have to now take this and rethink. I'm a pseudo amateur musician. I've been playing guitar since I was 14, right? I remember when I was a kid, and this is going to date me, and when I wanted to record music of my own, having a Fostex 4-track cassette tape recorder that allowed me to do 4 tracks at the same time. That was amazing. My MacBook, the MacBook that you have that you buy right out of the shop today, has a super sophisticated multi-tracking recording system that is light years ahead of what I had, and frankly, light years ahead of what the Beatles had when they recorded Sgt. Pepper's. The thing is, the tech's coming, right? But how do we better work with them, right? So that's the key thing. There's a quote that I wrote down that has been making the rounds. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do laundry and dishes, right?
100%.
It's well worth the procurement leader bearing that in mind, that the human has to be at the center. We have to think about what the human needs to get done, because not just because it's the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do, but practically because people want to deal with people. I want to deal with them in a more efficient way, more effective way, and get my results faster as a customer of procurement, but I want to deal with people. I don't just, I mean, some things I'll deal with machines, right? If I want to buy office supplies, fine. I'll go, punch out a catalog and whatever and do what I got to do. But I want people, right? The more important the category, I want people. So does that make sense in terms of the thinking?
What I love about that, Omer, is it sets the value that we need to continue to place on people in the right context, recognizing the business reality of continuing cost pressure, continuing need to evolve, continuing need to move to power tools as opposed to handcrafting things.
Yes.
And I think the ability of leaders to place those power tools in people's hands and help support them with the, look, it's okay to use the power drill. We've got 10,000 holes to drill. Don't use the hand auger. I believe deeply that these are the types of analogies and points of reference of now help the person do it safely. And by the way, every once in a while with a power drill, you're going to go a little off or you're going to be a little sideways. Here's how you fill it and do it again. Right? And that's normal. But that's where, to your earlier point, I think we cannot stress this enough. We cannot hold a computer accountable. So you cannot fire the computer. I mean, you can switch models, but fundamentally, it's the human that's accountable. And remembering that and setting this up with the trust and reliability that's going to help businesses run better, it's going to help people sleep better.
Yeah.
and provide the better service that people need, while people get to spend more time building the relationships that help unlock that hidden value. Because that's really the part that right now I don't see a good way for computers to really unlock the human trust factor that we get with that just gut reaction of like, hey, I like that guy. Or that sense of,
Yeah.
I don't know about that guy. Where's my wallet? Right. And the contrast between those two things, no AI is going to pick that up.
Yep. 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 Yeah. Maybe we'll have AGI, but that's a debate for another day.
Yeah. Omer, until another day, I am so grateful for you taking some time out of your schedule today. Thank you so much for joining us. And for all of you watching, this has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. See you next week.